Okay, hi and welcome. Introducing here Pam Dunn, which is someone that inspired me in my life, um, teacher and mentor going back. I'm only seeing here on the wall one of my certificates, which was already after all the training, which was in 2020, but we knew each other from before. I remember actually being once in California, once in Missouri, and then we did all the groups here back in the East.
Mhm.
So I would like to introduce and definitely inspired me in my life. So definitely this is the reason why I definitely felt it's definitely worthwhile to spread your light together here in the world. So I want to introduce Pam Don as a teacher and mentor and running the Infinite Life training and coaching for over 20 years. Done a lot of groups above the HMS at the time. Now it's I don't know what the name is today.
Empowered Living is the name of
Empowered
the
Empowered
company.
Living, yes, and definitely very inspirational. And the message that you have is actually the message that inspired me always, which was all about magnificence, that we're
Mhm.
magnificent at all times. And my question to you is if you can explain to the audience, first of all, what does magnificence mean? And you also have your saying, as I know, that behind every mistake you make is a glimpse of your magnificence. If you can
Mhm.
explain that.
Okay, starting right off the bat. So good to see you, Mendy, by the way.
Same here.
Um, I think the way I like to describe magnificence is that magnificence definitely is that moment of experiencing your greatness, but that's not the only time that we're magnificent. We're also magnificent when we feel angry, and instead of lashing out at somebody, we treat them with firm kindness. We're magnificent when we are afraid, and rather than just, run away or fight with the fear, we allow that feeling to move through us and we access our courage. Magnificence is when we feel hurt. And rather than just tell someone how they hurt us, we nurture and affirm our own heart. It's magnificent to dedicate our lives to learning, learning from everyone and everything. It's magnificent to see ourselves greater than our mistakes that we make in the moment. So I think I could go on, but I think I'm driving home the point that we can be magnificent even in those moments that we thought, are not okay. That when we're having a hard time, if we're switching to operating from who we truly want to be, that is magnificent, even if it's messy.
Even if it's messy. Wow. But the question is, how does someone really embody it? If they feel, let's say, for example, as a victimhood or things that happen to them, how do you bring in to people? So feeling, especially when somebody made a mistake or something, they feel not too happy about themselves, especially
Yeah.
or a person that always wants to be perfect and they feel they're not perfect. How do you combine magnificence into that?
Yeah, those are two really important things about what you're saying that I think, there's a lot of conditioning around mistakes and that I think the mistake that we make when it comes to looking at mistakes is that we associate ourselves with the mistake. In other words, we collapse who we are with what we do. And when it comes to a mistake, it's really important to see yourself as, greater than this mistake, and the mistake as being a behavior, meaning that I am not my mistake, but I made a mistake. And that it is my responsibility to clean up that mistake, to learn from that mistake, and to move forward. But beating myself up is not part of that. Most people, really, when we're thinking about the mistakes we make in relationship, for example, if you ask them, do you want me to punish this person for making this mistake? They're going to be like, no, I just want them to take responsibility, is what we often hear as coaches. And that can be done as long as you don't think that responsibility means beating yourself up.
So let's say a person is going to ask me, like, I'm magnificent says, so let's say even without a mistake, where does the person, how can you convince a person or tell him, I'm actually not trying to convince, to he should have feel embodied or she should feel embodied that I am magnificent. Let's say why, some people are brought up, you know what, I'm only magnificent when I had an A in school, or and I think most of us get brought up that way in a
Yeah.
way that only if you have that, then so we're how do we show it to to others that says who, because you said I'm magnificent, that's I'm still not embodying that magnificence. How do we go about that?
Well, I think there's a couple ways. One is that the thing is that I think first the understanding that if an A is how I measure myself, if I'm magnificent or not, that sort of perfection is actually driven by the shame of not being perfect. So anything lower than an A is going to create shame inside of you. It's hard to feel magnificent even when you're going for it if the driver is to avoid shame. So what we have to learn, and this is like an inside out job, we have to learn that our who are we and how do we want to show up in the world? Like sure, I'd love an A, but if I'm doing my best, my personal best, and I get a B, then what I'm going to do, if I'm coaching somebody, I'm going to say, that's amazing. Tell me what it took for you to get that B, because then I can start reflecting on, or they'll start reflecting on what it is that they got, that they had to overcome, that they had to present themselves as in order to get that grade. And I started that with my kids when they were young. If you'll indulge me with a story, I think it'll get the point home. My son, I was talking to him over the phone about a report card that he got. He was in grade school at the time, and I think third or fourth grade. And they used to do on behavior, they used to do checks and X's. And he said he was, I said, how was your report card? And he said, well, first goes to, well, I got an X. And I'm like, okay, well, what'd you get an X in? And then, he said it was, I talk too much and I'm not paying attention. And I said, okay, well, what do you want to do about that? So that's the first place that most of the time as parents or teachers, we automatically think we know the answer. So because we have more experience than them, so we may know an answer. And so we start preaching to them or telling them what they need to do in order to raise their grade. And instead, I asked him, what do you think we should do? Or what is it that you want to do? And he had this long pause. And then he said, I want to snuggle more. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, I want to snuggle more. I said, okay, so you're telling me that if you and I snuggle more, then you will get checks instead of X's? And he said, yeah. I'm like, all right, done. And I mean, I had to do my part, right? But that was one of those things like, I could dive into that and we could do a lot of psychology on that, which is not as important as what actually took place. And that was the intrinsic motivation that was created.
And I was thinking what you're saying about snuggle. It just took my mind away. 1 second. It's like, is there a somatic response over here? Because
Exactly,
that's
right?
somatic
Yeah.
bringing in into life. That's yeah. Wow. That's and I guess it worked out.
Yes, it did work out. It actually did. I was very happy to do my part in snuggling more.
From where did you take? this, when did you start with this magnificence? How did this come to you? Is it a
Mm.
philosophy, or where that did that got, how did that get created?
I think that when I look back, like, oh yeah, I came up with using this word and elaborating on the definition in my adult years. But I really think if I look back, I can watch myself. And what I can observe is that I always had this way of looking at people and seeing the best in them. Like that was just an automatic for me. I also grew up not having the experience in my family of people seeing the best in me first. Like I didn't feel magnificent growing up. And that's not to blame my parents or my siblings, but which they probably have their part in it, but but the reality is that my beliefs weren't aligned with that, and yet it didn't match with what I saw in other people. So there was always this desire inside of me to just have the most generous interpretation of other people. And that just started playing out in my life and in my parenting and in my work, and then morphed into this work. But I think when I look back, it wasn't the word I would have used. I would have said I want people to see the best in me. I when I would make a mistake, I wanted people to notice my intention, not my mistake, that kind of thing.
So to me, this resonates in a way because um, coming from the place of Torah and Kabbalistic aspects, it's brought down that. And
Mm,
actually, there was one of the sages by the name lived in 1745, which he created a whole book called the Tanya, and his name was Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi. He lived in Ukraine,
mm,
where his whole book, and especially where he starts, that we are put together from God with godly components. So your components, your makeup is godly. So if you're going to meditate and noticing, and we do have actually two components working within us, which basically we have a body, we have a soul, and where the soul is godly, and that's what you're resonating to magnificence most probably at all times.
mhm,
However, your body is pulling you sometimes to, more food and more this world on this planet. And your work is to put them together because they need to live together. But what he brings out is his in the first chapters of his book that magnificence is something that you should start looking into, and that's basically for the mundane regular people. He's not talking about the higher ups, and he says no, this is for the people that are on the on surface level. You should be aware that you're godly, and in the Torah itself it's brought down that we are all in the image of God, so it's also based on that. So if
mhm.
we are in the image of God, and that's why when you're bringing this message in, it feels we're talking here the same thing. So
I love that.
that's it's but it sounds to me that you have a gift because naturally not everybody has that. It's something that you really need to work hard in order to see the good in yourself and the good in others in front of you, even though they don't look the same. And let's say they might be not as functional as you, but they're still part of of that magnificence, which I call that the godly spark, and God put them down here. There's a reason for that. That's so you have a gift
Hmm.
that you were born with in order to wow, meaning it's something that I admire. I
Thank
think this is what admired me the first time that I met you as well.
you.
So that's
I feel so grateful that I think we all have a life that could lead us down any path, right? And I do, especially at this point in my life, I'm often so grateful that, I didn't take a path that would lead to my ruin. I took a path that, really sparked you know, adds spark to my my soul's journey and my soul's expression.
Yeah, so and I'm reminding myself also, I know a lot in your teachings that you teach, are you living on purpose?
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because this is connected.
Yes.
And that is actually a person is supposed to, live on purpose and know their purpose and resonate with their purpose. And I also find sometimes, when clients, especially younger clients come in, I don't know my purpose. I don't know what my purpose. I didn't even start thinking what my purpose is. And I don't know at what age. Meaning, I wouldn't say I'm thinking back in my younger years if I knew my purpose. No, but I know that I was, pulling strings, and in order to, and again, it's a process. Definitely, it's a process, and purpose also changes obviously in life, and you can have different multi-purposes as well. But there is, the unique purpose for your soul, and then there is the purpose that individual purpose and this family purpose and this, community purpose. There's different things in order to bring in. But how do you introduce this to the teens or to the young 20s about purpose? When you come in, I don't know my purpose. I don't even think about my purpose. I know that I want to have a nice car, but I don't know about my purpose.
That's not purpose. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and actually you're right in what I say is that, it's important to be on purpose. And what I mean by that is that you are the purpose. So what you do isn't as important as who you are when you're doing it. That's being on purpose, and that's why we do in all of our courses, and especially in our work with the youth, we focus on I am statements. We focus on character. And that's about learning, like, what are the character traits that resonate with you. That's why magnificence, just it resonated with me, and then I could expand on it. And there's other words that resonate with me too. uh, but the thing is when you start looking at character, like loving, caring, kind, considerate, cooperative, yeah, I'm funny, I'm using all the C words, right? I even thought compassionate. Let's move on to, empathetic. Like there's so many different character traits, and that's where you find purpose on the inside, from the inside out. So the I happen to be blessed, and I feel like being able to not only know that my purpose is to assist people to honor, discover, and express their magnificence. I also live that myself. But even if, or even when I was running an in-home daycare, I was on purpose because I was still operating that way with the kids in the daycare. So so purpose means that you first identify who you are, and bring who you are to everything you do. And that will have you feel on purpose and be on purpose.
So if a person wants to start, what's the best way for them to start to figure out what their purpose is and living for magnificence? What
I think the
baby
first
steps?
one of the first steps that I always suggest is, and people can do this now who are listening, think of somebody you admire. They don't have to be alive. They don't have to be somebody, great, but who's the first person that comes to mind when you think of someone you admire?
You're reminding me something because I have here on the wall a chart that I made with you in Missouri at a
Mm,
workshop, and I feel it's and on these big papers. This yeah, and
yeah,
I think those were the questions. And actually, the person that I admire is also on that paper. So that's why
nice.
Was that the
See?
same was that the
Yeah,
same
it's sort
process?
of the same process.
And
Yeah. So,
it's here in my office, and I constantly look at it just to remind me. I know there's a heart and there's different things, and I never can never forget about it. It's like it's unique. It's hanging on the wall. It's in the back of my door.
nice.
Yeah.
See,
So I'm
so
thinking, right. So
yeah,
somebody
so
that I
when
admire,
you think of someone you admire, then you think of two or three character traits that you admire about them. So I'll choose my mother, for example. I admire my mother, and two things I admire about her is her determination and her compassion. So then what I know, so we can do that. You can do that with several people. And what you want to begin understanding is the people that you admire, those traits are what are resonating inside of you. That's the inside out. The person you admire is a reflection of what's important to you.
it's a mirror.
Yeah.
And that is also a Kabbalistic aspect. It's amazing because we had in the early 1700s, there lived somebody by the name, which was the teacher to the one that I told you before, the Baal
Mm,
Shem Tov. And he says, when you see something wrong in someone, he says, look into yourself because it's reflecting back to you.
yes.
You know, and that's exactly what you're saying here.
And we are willing to do that when we see something wrong, but what about when we see something great?
Something great. Yeah.
That's important too. And so by beginning to resonate with some of those character traits, then you can begin deciding. And I think teen years are really important because teens want to begin operating from their own sense of identity. And often the way they do that is by saying who they don't want to be like. I
Hmm.
don't want to be like my mother. I don't want to be like my father, but they aren't identifying who they want to be. And so if they start creating their own character traits, and you can do 3 to 5, those are an amount easy to work with, and you hold yourself, like I say, you hold yourself and others accountable to who they truly are. So if I'm going to hold, one of my kids accountable for fighting with his brother, I might ask him, "What's your I am statement?" I am friendly, I am kind, I am a good friend, or I'm a good brother. And then I'll say, "Okay, of those, like when you hit your brother, you can see that doesn't match your I am statement. So, how can you use your I am statement to get back on track with your brother?"
But I think that's, when I would ask a client the I am statement, sometimes they never thought about it before. Like
Right.
it's like something, and they can be really older than teens, can be in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know. So they ask me, so what is it? And I have to like bring them into like just whatever comes up, just you don't have to break your head for that. Just,
Right.
but it's so new to them. But it's bringing it into teenage years and upbringing and with children and you know I know myself, I didn't have it when I was that young. I wish I would have it. I wouldn't have to work that hard again. I'm not going back.
It's so true, right?
Yeah, but um, yeah, the I am statement is a very, very powerful thing, which those are the gifts that God gave you in time of birth, and it's yours. And that is what, if you tap into that, you're going out to the world with that message.
Hmm.
And that's really, that takes you down the path. Um,
I use my I am statements when I'm entering into what might be a challenging conversation or a place where I'm going to do something new and different.
mhm.
I use my I am statement before I, signed on to do the podcast with you because I always get nervous when I know I'm going to be recorded. Like we're just we're simply human.
Right.
And the I am statement reminds us that we're far greater than the person we believe ourselves to be in the moment that we're doing something scary.
I can share with you an experience that I had, and like, and I was wondering, I'll share I sometimes it took me time to believe in myself that I can do so much in especially in the healing world, which I till I realized that no, it's not me. It's a gift that I have from God in order to do that.
Mm.
But I really felt like in the beginning it took me time. Is this really true? And I did things because I did it from I had a passion and I was very in it. But when you're seeing the results and very strong results, and like it took me like then I says, you know what? It took me time to channel that, even though because I didn't want to take it into my ego and I didn't want to,
Yeah.
boost my. So I says, you know what? No, no, no. I'm strictly a messenger. But it's like it took me time to till it fell into place. And I constantly remind myself on a daily basis the same message. In
Mm.
order, like we go into a session, you're going to with the client. In order to, yes, I'm strictly, it's I'm a channel through God bringing through the message. So then it's a totally different. And I guess if I'm going to take your words, if God chose me to do this, I guess then I'm magnificent. you know,
Yes,
very
you are.
very simple. And,
Yes,
and
you
that's
are.
and I'm doing the purpose exactly where He wants me to be.
Yeah.
That's there is
Well,
also there's also a saying as far as purpose. A purpose has four things. I think you're allowed to make money. It's something that people need, and what you should be happy. Can you help me with that? I remember that's an old saying of purpose is allowed to, it's allowed to be connected to your livelihood, and it's what people the world needs, and it's something that you like to do.
hmm.
I don't remember the fourth one,
And
but
it makes you feel good about
makes you
yourself.
feel it makes you feel good about yourself.
Hmm. Yeah.
Meaning, I guess,
And
yeah,
I think that, you're mentioning like it's when you're blessed enough and work hard enough to get to be able to do that, like you are and I too. The thing about that is that you know, there comes a point and it comes with the years of practice and working on uh making mistakes and humbling yourself around, the knowing that I will make mistakes, I can make mistakes, and I'm going to learn from those. I think eventually the fulfillment of the service becomes far greater than it just makes you feel good. There's a difference in how that feels for people.
right, right, and definitely, this is in the mental health field, and they need to have supervision for this reason. And I also took upon myself that I have supervision on a weekly basis, going through all my clients just to make sure I do make mistakes. And
Mhm.
I do make and I asked actually one of my supervisors, so like should I go back or tell the client or should I no says no, no, no. As long as you know that you made a mistake and you're feeling it and you know what you need to do for it, you don't have to tell anything. You should continue. Like it's like so I like to do it because that's what I was going to ask you also. What is, because I feel a person, just like we need to always have, even, people that are in the field, if it's the coaches and therapists, in order to continue our work. It's not, in a way, we're dealing with a lot of people, dealing with a lot of things going on, and we also have a life, but it's in order to, what gives us the power and what do you use on a daily basis to continue this work and just to make sure that we are in center, that we're, aligned with us, with, mind, body, and soul is in alignment, and, you know, taking a grip of ourselves.
I think there's a few things I do. Number one, I have my own therapist and my own coach, and I use them regularly. And when I'm in my own challenges, I use them even more regularly. So I think that's important. The other thing is that I do stay in learning. In other words, I am not going to tell my client to do anything I was not ever willing to do myself. And that, if I'm working with a client that is, I'm there, they want some help with their relationships at home, and I'm not doing anything about my relationship at home, that's that just is an out of alignment situation.
100%. And a matter of fact, it won't even work.
It's true,
It
but
won't even work.
it's true. It doesn't.
So again, in Kabbalah, we learn that, let's say, if I'm going to be working on anger, so I am also perfecting in the universe others that are struggling with anger, it will be easier for them. So meaning we're seeing how much
Mm,
energy there is. So telling a client to do something or to talk about something, and if you're not, what they say, you cannot take somebody up the mountain if he didn't climb that same mountain.
that's true. Yeah.
So it's and that's yeah, that's powerful. So yeah, so definitely, and I'm glad that you're saying that because I want our audience as well to hear, and it became a lot better. But there's no shame to have a therapist. It doesn't make a difference what age. And there's no, again, there's different cultures. The culture, even in our communities, there's different types and different things. It became a lot more popular these days, but there's some that still won't, and it's so painful to watch if they don't do it because, but it's painful to watch sometimes when they don't do it and you're hearing the struggles or from the outside. But using a coach or using a therapist is something that is growth, and you're always going to be biased towards yourself. So when you have that reflection and you hear it from a therapist or from a coach, that's something that teaches you. That's growth. Actually, I had that message actually this week on one of my short videos. I said, when you make a cake or you make a bread, you still have to, you have to knit it and do and throw it and mix it and all of that. And then the nice cake or the nice bread comes out. So there's no gain without pain. That's the bottom line. Meaning to say, you want to grow, growth happens through work. It's not,
Right.
and so
The
some so
discomfort. You're not
yeah,
going to be
this
comfortable.
discomfort. That's
Yeah.
exactly this. And I do differentiate, which is important to know that struggle is not the same as pain.
True.
Pain is something that you can work through, and it's something that comes. It's here. Struggle is something I think that the person does it to themselves.
Mm,
It's something that is nobody told you to struggle. God doesn't want you to struggle either. He wants you to work, to grow, to do, to learn. The same way you go to the gym. If you want to build muscle, you got to pick it up, and it's tough, and you sweat, and each week you go higher and higher. It's the same with yeah. That is amazing. I also know that you have in your courses, and that's so important. But I want to bring out to people, if you can talk about victimhood, when
mm.
people feel like a victim because of their parents, because of their upbringing, because of their whatever happened to them emotionally or physically, something wrong, and especially I remember that chart. I actually have your folder here. Um, how a victim mindset thinks and how a reliant
Self-reliant. Yeah.
self-reliant, which is so amazing. I
Mhm.
would like you to bring it out to the world. That's such an important point that it inspired me in those days, and something that I can't forget. But I bump into a lot of victimhood stories, and it takes a long time to take them out of victimhood. First to see,
Yeah.
I was hurt, and they can't grow. They don't notice, and it takes time because you can't even talk to them. You can't grow, and nothing is going to happen. Your family life, your children, your business, nothing is going to work because you're stuck in victimhood. Tell us about this.
Yeah. So I think I want to first start off by saying, making the distinction is that it is true. Whatever you were the victim of is true. And it isn't about taking that away, but it's about adopting a different mindset, even though you had this horrible, bad, terrible, however you want to describe it, thing happen.
Right.
The Viktor Frankl story is probably one of, the elite stories around this concept in that he was victimized in a concentration camp, and he never held on to his victim mindset about that. And because of that, he found purpose and meaning in his life. And so, man's search for meaning, if you're having a hard time understanding the concept. But the reality to what you're speaking about is that if people can understand that, what happened to me uh, did create some beliefs about myself, in it, as a result. Those beliefs can be changed. What happened to me can't, but what I believe about it and how I come through it and what I believe about myself and life can change. And so it's about pulling apart, the difference between being victimized by something and having a victim mindset about that thing.
So the work is now to split the data that happened to the belief from the
Right.
belief.
And there's most often that's where the work is, right? Where therapy and all different modalities of therapy and coaching come and play here. And that's healing the trauma or the victimization from from the inside. You can't you're not going to heal what happened. You're going to heal what happened inside of you as a result of what happened. And I think that, uh, there's, I don't know whose quote it is or who says this, but what they say is that you are not responsible for what happened to you. You are responsible for the healing of that.
To continue further.
Yeah.
And then there's another also just to bring out that when somebody has the pain where they were injured in as by young age,
Mm,
doesn't mean that they cannot grieve over it and cry over it, but they can still change the belief.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
they
grief.
should be a,
Yeah, grief is usually part of the process,
right.
in shifting the mindset. But it is, and I don't mean that it's only in your head that you have to change. When you change your mindset, then your feelings can follow and your beliefs can follow. And the mindset change can be simply like, I don't want to operate from this belief that I am damaged because of what happened to me. I want to believe something different about myself.
So in general, we know the question is when we're not able to tell it to a client right away that the trauma is actually our teacher
Mm,
because trauma is here to teach you something and to make you stronger into this world, what you need to bring into this world. The more work you do with the client, then they will start to understand that the trauma is a teacher. Let's say, for example, they have the same things, for example, in a 12-step program or any type of these programs, they don't allow only someone that was a recovered addict in order to be a teacher, in order to be a mentor, in order to be, but in general, the even in the Kabbalah aspect, we also see that trauma is, we call it planet trauma. That's something that it's a fact. Everybody has it in a different way. Capital T, not capital T. It can be a baby, you can see a butterfly and have trauma also. There's different types of trauma that, however, from the trauma itself, you need to do the work to understand what is it in this story that happened to me that I needed to learn that I became stronger that I can bring out to this world.
I think that approach is the challenging part about that approach is that if it's brought on without too soon or without a significant amount of healing, then what you'll have is a client that will hang on to it because it'll feel dismissive,
Definitely.
to the pain.
And that's what I'm
So
saying. You
yeah.
you cannot do that in the beginning. It's something when you've done the work, you go back and you see it.
And
Definitely not.
usually, the thing I will say is usually the client itself themselves will say, wow, I'm learning so much from this experience. And I've even said I went through something very challenging about 5 years ago. And it was with a, it involved other people. And you know, I remember saying to a group of people that I was talking about with this was that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to want me to thank those people for what I learned as a result of what they did to me. And I said, I actually don't need to thank them. I need to thank me for the way that I navigated through that. Like, that's what resilience is, that I am not the same person that I was then, when that happened to me and who I am now. And that's because of what I did, like where I was coming from. It's,
Meaning you've done the work.
yeah. And I think that's the thing that we want, somebody who's at the beginning stages of working through that. That's the thing, that the message we want to send, that on the other side of working through this, it'll be some of the hardest work you may feel like you've ever done, but on the other side of it is the freedom that you've
Freedom.
been longing for.
Yeah. You can't even express that feeling in words.
Right, right.
What can
But
you
we've
tell us?
experienced it, so they can feel it when we say it,
Right, right. And tell us something about guilt and shame.
Mm. One of my favorite topics.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I'll use what Brene Brown says. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. And so that's the difference. The other thing that, it's something I've just been spending a little bit more time with and understanding and helping people with, because it is so prevalent, guilt and shame in everybody's lives. And so that's the first thing, is really just to normalize it. That everybody, not to be dismissive, but to normalize. Everyone has shame, so don't feel ashamed that you have shame. Like everyone has shame and everyone feels guilty. And shame does not serve you at all. Guilt can. And so it's important to understand the difference in yourself. Shame is going to feel very heavy and dense and lead you to not want to do anything, or lead you to do things that kind of go against your inner compass. And that's shame driven. Perfection is not part of our inner compass because it is driven by shame. And so shame needs perfection, and perfection needs shame in order to keep going. So shame simply needs to be released. Anytime shame comes up, all you have to do is say to yourself, I release this shame. It's not serving you. There are times when, if you're holding a lot of shame that, is aligned with a story, sometimes sharing that with somebody who you trust to hold this for you and to witness you in this, that can let go of, that can release the shame. The way you want to think about it, if shame is dark and heavy, shining a light on it makes it not that anymore. So that's the goal with shame. Guilt, on the other hand, uh, is can serve you. In other words, it can be the reminder that, oh, I've done this before. I don't want to do that again. I've been sarcastic in that way. And it hurt somebody. I don't want to do that again. And the difference is sometimes people use guilt as a means of taking responsibility. Like my oldest son, I think I inadvertently taught him that in the beginning of his life. And I noticed that, whenever I would call him out when he was younger on doing something, he'd be like, I'm sorry. He'd immediately go into that, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, Mom, I'll never do it again. And you could just hear in his tone that he was going to a guilt feeling. And so what he was basically doing was his mode of responsibility was to say, I know I'm bad, because guilt can slip into shame quite easily.
How would you differentiate between guilt and regret?
I think that they're the same, actually. I think that they feel the same because regret is important too. Like I've done many things in my life that I regret, and that regret keeps me from doing them again.
Because the interesting part is in Hebrew, there's no word for guilt. There's a word for regret, but not guilt.
Interesting.
They because the Torah aspect is that a person shouldn't go around feeling guilty because it's going to disturb him. He's going to go around being guilty, guilty, guilty. He's not going to be able to function. You can
Right.
regret. Regret means okay, then you go to repent. Then you go to, and that's fine. You can, but going around, even if you do a sin, there's no such thing as guilty. You can regret it and then repent, and you're done. Don't go around the rest of your life because then it's going to cause you to be feeling as a victim again. It's going to cause you to feel small, and that's that. The Torah doesn't want that. And it's a very interesting concept, and I always have it in front of me that no, sometimes you feel good. No, no, no. You know, I regret. I'm sorry. So that's that. There's a differentiation. That's why I was asking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see like the thing is with regret, most of the time, if we do something we regret, we also have done the learning around it and we've done the cleanup, the
Right,
makeup about it.
right. The
And
cleanup.
and that's really what needs to be done, you know, with anything you feel guilty about as well.
Yeah, yeah. Meaning to say, clean up the guilt.
Yes,
Clean up the guilt. Don't stay with the guilt. That
right,
that's
right.
that's where the people stay stuck if they stay with the guilt. That is where
Mhm.
that stuckness, and that will bring them into I would say a victim mindset or something.
Yeah, and a
That
shame cycle.
shame cycle.
It definitely will lead to that. That's why it's yeah.
Okay, that's beautiful. So, is there any good tips and guidance that you can give what people can do on a daily basis or weekly basis in order to, let's call it, be in the zone?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I would say the very first thing I think about is start, and one of the practices I have is start every day with an intention. And that intention can be, I am going to practice being loving and compassionate today. And go through your day being focused on that intention and pivot where you need to pivot, shift where you need to shift, and at the end of the day tell yourself three things you appreciate that you accomplished that day being from your intention, and name something where you're going, that you want to create some improvement in, or like do a little bit better next time. So it's not about excusing yourself, but it's about assessing yourself accurately. Do you if you're going to assess what you did wrong, do you also assess what you did well? And that's important to end your days with.
Checks and balances, checking it
Mhm.
out and making it. Yeah, and like if you do it in your business, you should do it in your personal growth and your personal that will help you, and even in your business because all this, if we bring it into the business world, same idea, purpose, shame, guilt, all these tools, no matter if you're at home or if you're in the business, you can bring it in with your workers and with your people that are sitting with you in the office. Same idea, and just to go over, yeah, this is also actually in the Torah aspect, they require that to do it on also on every before you go to sleep, and they call it cheshbon nefesh, meaning to say you're calculating basically your a calculation of your soul, what happened today.
Nice.
But what in the fast-paced world where everything is going fast and scrolling and what it's important. Basically, that's where a lot of my work comes in somatic work, breath work, or grounding yourself for a few minutes, sitting on a chair, feeling your feet on the ground, just because if these are overwhelm over here, this doesn't this not you're not in the same space. Yeah,
So true what you're saying. And I'm even thinking, yeah, I want to add, like, before you do that at the end of the day, take a deep breath.
deep
You
breath.
know? Yeah, you're right on about that.
No, it's just like you don't forget to put in gas into your car. You got to do it to your body. It's
Mhm.
the same idea. Wow, it was very beautiful here to have you on this podcast, and actually very good learning moments. And hopefully we can bring a lot of light and spread it to the world. And hopefully we can do
Amen to
this
that.
again. And keep up your good work.
Thank you, Mendy.
And
You too. I know you're
okay,
out there doing great things.
okay.
Thank
So I
you for that.
definitely thank you a lot for that as well. So,
You bet.
all right.